50 years since the founding of the Organization of the African Unity, or the OAU, today better known as the AU. The organization was established to assert and pursue the unity of Africa amongst its diverse nationalities, cultures, and religious practices, among other things. The DRC caught repeated headlines as the M23 rebels continued with their war to topple President Joseph Kabila. This led to the UN-approved creation of its first-ever offensive combat force to carry out targeted operations aimed at disarming the notorious M23 rebels and other renegade forces. In May, South Africa's Minister of Defense, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, confirmed that South Africa had deployed troops outside of our borders. The Central African Republic was one of the countries. South Africa suffered a major blow when more than a dozen of South African National Defence Force members were shot dead by the rebels. Kenya suffered one of the worst atrocities when gunmen laid a siege on the popular Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi. 72 people, including 61 civilians, were killed and more than 200 were reportedly wounded during the attack. The Islamist group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack.
Finally, it should be underscored that our goal is not and should not be a crusade against ICC, but a solemn call for the organization to take Africa's concerns seriously.
Kenyan authorities received a significant backing when the special sitting of the African Union called for the non-prosecution of sitting heads of states by the International Criminal Court. This as the ICC was prosecuting Kenya's incumbent president Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy. The AU argued that the ICC was biased against African leaders. In October, Madagascar took off with the first round of elections. This was the first election since the coup which saw Andy Rajoelina take power after ousting Ravalomanana. The two were since asked not to stand in the elections, which resulted in a candidate supported by Rajoelina leading the polls. Mali's presidential elections were finally settled when Somali Cisse conceded defeat to Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The long-standing conflicts in Mali nearly resulted in the collapse of the government. Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, was removed from power in July. Hundreds of Morsi supporters died when they clashed with Egyptian security forces in protest to his arrest and his ousting in Cairo. South Africa hosted the 5th BRICS Summit. The summit agreed on establishing BRICS Development Bank. The group decided to capitalize the bank with $50 billion. This with Russia, Brazil and India contributing $18 billion each, and South Africa and China $5 billion each. Embarking on his Africa tour, US President Barack Obama, accompanied by his wife Michelle, visited Senegal, South Africa and Tanzania. In the Middle East, Syria remains in the grip of a bloody civil war. More than 100,000 civilians have lost their lives and millions more displaced inside and outside of the country's borders. North Korea caused panic after its launch of a long-range missile. It issued a threatening statement warning both South Korea and the US that any provocation would swiftly escalate into an all-out nuclear conflict. The United States had its share of bad news. In April, 2 pressure cooker bombs exploded through the crowds near the finishing line of the Boston Marathon. 3 people were killed. Former Central Intelligence Agency officer Edward Snowden dominated headlines when he leaked important documents about the US and British government surveillance programs. The US also had numerous internal issues. The government began a partial government shutdown for the 18th time since 1976. This following disagreements between the two houses of Congress, failing to agree on a new budget. Pope Benedict XVI's retirement took the world by surprise. Benedict thanked believers for respecting his decision to retire. He said he was standing down for the good of the church. He was replaced by the first pontiff from Latin America, Pope Francis, who was voted a new leader for the globally powerful Roman Catholic Church. The world lost iconic leaders in 2013. Former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher died in April at the age of 87. And Venezuela's popular president, Hugo Chavez, died after succumbing to a 2-year battle with cancer. Lehana Tsotetsi, SABC News.